The views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the Lafayette Bible Fellowship. You are listening to the Vigilance Radio Network.
Hello everyone. Jasmine, it might be a little loud, FYI, but hello everyone.
We're not redlining.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to Culture Insanity, the podcast. So I think we made a little boo-boo last time. This, I believe, is episode number 12. So welcome back and welcome to the 12th episode of the show. May 9th. Pastor, hello. How are you?
Howdy.
How are you holding up?
Oh, I'm doing right fine.
Did you say you're doing mighty fine?
That's right.
Oh, sorry, it's hard to hear you through your thick southern twang, but that's good to hear. Yeah, thanks for coming back, everyone. And here we go. I think Josh already posted, but what we got on the docket is perhaps a couple more non-issues and then a larger discussion that I'm more interested in having on perhaps post-COVID-19 as it relates to pop culture and art and so on. So let's get these what I think are non-issues out of the way first, but nonetheless things that have made their way, unfortunately, into the headlines because people have time to write things that what I would consider not incredibly compelling. So first up, Joaquin Phoenix was put on blast. An article posted on Yahoo Life. He was put on blast for his Oscar acceptance speech. And now I know what you guys might be thinking. What? That was forever ago. Honestly, it feels like forever ago because we've all been stuck because of COVID and stuff. But an article was published in Yahoo Life about Joaquin Phoenix's Oscar acceptance speech when he won the Academy Award for The Joker. And he was criticized by what I presume to be a self-proclaimed mentally ill person.
I don't know.
As you don't know. The writer of the article, several times throughout the article, makes references to their own personal struggles with mental illness. But anyways, in his acceptance speech, he made a comment about the importance of commonality within the fights of injustice and the marginalized people, and then he cited a few of groups of what he considers the marginalized, and in it he didn't include in his speech disabled people. So the author of this article goes on a whole tangent about how and why that just continues to undermine the problem toward disabled people, whether it be the homeless, whether it be
Right. This is the article where they talked about being ableist.
Oh yeah.
Right. Okay.
Which, yeah, the author suggests that maybe Joaquin Phoenix is an ableist, and we're all ableist for not acknowledging fully the groups of the marginalized people. So for those of you who are wondering what an ableist is, that's a good question. I guess we can just make up words now because we're upset about something. But an ableist is someone who, and correct me if I'm wrong, you got the tablet, the Google's in front of you perhaps, but an ableist is someone who is promoting able-bodied people specifically above those with disabilities or defects of any kind.
Yeah, I'll read the definition to you.
Yeah.
Okay, so ableism, also known as ableism or disableism in British English, or an anapyrophobia or anapyrism, and also disability discrimination, is discrimination and social prejudice against people with disabilities or who are perceived to have disabilities. Ableism characterizes persons as defined by their disabilities and as inferior to the non-disabled. On this basis, people are assigned or denied certain perceived abilities, skills, or character orientations. And then it goes on to say these are stereotypes, generally inaccurate, associated with either disability in general or with specific disabilities. For instance, a presumption that all disabled people want to be cured, that wheelchair users necessarily have an intellectual disability, or that blind people have some special form of insight. These stereotypes in turn serve as a justification for ableist practices and reinforce discriminatory attitudes and behaviors toward people who are disabled. Labeling affects people when it limits their options for actions or changes their identity. Sorry, this is relevant still. In ableist societies, people with disabilities are viewed as less valuable or even less than human. The eugenics movement of the early 20th century would be considered an example of widespread ableism. The mass murder of disabled people in Nazi Germany's Action T4 would be an extreme example of ableism. Ableism can also be better understood by reading literature published by those who experience disability and ableism firsthand. Disability studies is an academic discipline that is also beneficial to explore to gain a better understanding of ableism. And that is from the great Wikipedia. So at least you get the popular understanding of what ableism is.
So sorry, and you probably just said it somewhere in there, but is my interpretation of ableism that it is specifically in reference to to promoting a healthier individual above someone who is disabled in some sort of fashion?
Right. It's the idea is that you is that people who are able-bodied are better, and specifically what it addresses is, let's see, certain perceived abilities, skills, or character orientations.
So,
which for the record, I think is ridiculous. People with able bodies are better at certain skills. I mean, that's just, they just are. I don't know. That's really weird to me.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to the discussion of the physiological difference between men and women when it comes to physical things, as a general, not to say that there aren't instances. For example, Ronda Rousey could destroy me or you or anyone in this church probably, but as a general, men are physiological different. Someone who is able-bodied is better at things than someone who has a disability, and
of course we're talking about general. Can that be specifically overcome in a specific individual? Sure. If I'm sitting at the bottom of the stairs and I am paraplegic, if I'm sitting at the bottom of the stairs, I will absolutely be able to get up the stairs slower than you who are able-bodied. That's just the truth. Now, specifically, is it possible that you can condition yourself to move up the stairs faster than me? Of course it is.
I actually just saw this insane thing of this Iranian woman who she's paralyzed on some sort of level, to a large extent. I don't think she has movement of her arms, of her perhaps even her legs, but she can move her toes, for example. Yeah. And she did this. She did a couple of them actually of this crazy portrait of these soccer players that are
paintings.
They look real.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I know plenty of people who can paint with their hands that are terrible, and then there's people who can paint with their feet that are great. And because I've seen both people who are paralyzed with their hands do it, and then I've also seen some stuff where they're not paralyzed with their hands. It's just something they do because they're freaky that way. Mm-hmm. But those people should be celebrated more. There's a reason why we have something called the Special Olympics, because they're special,
Those people that can paint like that with their feet, they've determined in life they don't want to be defeated.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Back where I come from. Okay. So we're not really big on isms. So we just view people in the world of there are people who can do and there are people who can't do.
Okay. Well, see, and I think that's where you get into ableist philosophy, where then people just simply say that a person can't. I don't think that it's that they can't. It's that they are necessarily different, and I think that those differences should be allowed for and understood without it being believed to be a prejudice. It's not prejudice; it's just fact. Now,
That's right.
can
Yes,
they?
Josh,
Sure.
that's why we just accept people as they are.
I don't know. That's hard for me to take that. You came from the 1950s. Like, when you were 10, they were having race riots.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, normally you tell me I come from the 1910s.
Okay.
Anyways, so her concluding thing says, and just to get back to the article and what we think about where this person is coming from, is we're dying because of ableism's influence on employers, insurance companies, and even the government. Our rights need just as much as attention as any of the marginalized groups you mentioned in your acceptance speech, especially when it is an ableism-based story that gets you an award. Ableism is everywhere in Joker, and I ask that you remember the disability community for this reason. My main, like, on the surface critique of this person who is offended, I guess, at the lack of acknowledgement, is that platform that those actors and producers and directors get during that time is notoriously cutting them short on their speeches and stuff. So to hold that against them it's a bit unfair. When he was heading in the direction and trying to give credence to what he thinks are, injustices and marginalized people and stuff like that, because that show, the Academy Awards, regularly, plays people off the stage with their music to, fit into a time frame and stuff. So it's a bit harsh.
Well, he's been outspoken before on numerous occasions about what how he felt the Joker movie could, could help people with mental. Well, I guess apparently to this person, these mental issues are disabilities. And should be in line with like actual disabilities. The thing you got to remember is that the idea of a disability changes over time. When we're dealing with mental, the DSM changes. That's why we've got multiple versions of it. So this concept that a mental disability is static and is the same thing as somebody who's deaf or somebody who's blind or somebody whose body you can tell is working a certain way. That's a pretty static definition. It's not hard to understand that somebody, again, with no legs is disabled. But somebody who has a mental disability, where that concept is constantly shifting in our understanding. And so, first of all, I think Joaquin Phoenix and Todd Phillips, the director, have stated multiple times that they want people to be sympathetic and treat people better. This just isn't the platform, so I agree with you. But then on top of it, I don't think that bandwagoning your cause onto this being a disabled thing versus a non-disabled thing, or an able thing, is a fair way of looking at it. And I would challenge it personally from a Christian perspective. I don't know that you can talk about mental disability except for in very extreme cases. I don't know that you can just accept the DSM's idea of what is
the DSM?
So the DSM is forgive me, I can't remember the exact acronym, sorry. I was anachronism versus acronym.
Is it just like, if you will, the governing body or the organization? Or something?
No, I'll look up the actual term, but basically the DSM is the guidebook for what they view as a mental disability, basically. So looks like maybe we're on DSM-5. There it is, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
Gotcha.
So, and that's the thing, like disorder versus disability. I just, I, as a Christian counselor in particular, I take grave concern with somebody labeling their disorder as a disability. A disorder being something that isn't working properly, that can be cured in a lot of cases, Whereas disabled, meaning you literally like don't have that part or it's broken and cannot work. I take a lot of issue with that.
Genetics versus
exactly.
Learned.
My take on it. You want to hear my take?
Yeah.
You know, I thought that Joaquin Phoenix was over the top, and that wasn't the platform for him.
You mean in his speech?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I get tired of that nonsense. You know, you're an actor. You're being recognized for your acting. Okay, I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with, ranting on about, a particular issue. So, okay, that's fine. That's what they do. As far as the author now who is bringing forth in this article their particular complaint and saying, hey, Joaquin, you need to broaden your understanding. Good for them. At least they put their thoughts together and tried to articulate it and say that, hey, maybe he could have been, if he's going to rant about everything else, he might as well go ahead and include that as well. I don't necessarily see that that's a bad thing, but it's of no consequence. I mean, they wanted to voice, they had a voice, and that's okay. As far as the Christian context is concerned, Josh, I agree with you. But in the Christian community, in particular mental illness, oftentimes that was understood in the context of either sin or demon possession or demon oppression. And Christianity has been very harsh towards people that have various types of mental instability. So that's my take on it. I mean, listen, from a standpoint of understanding disabilities, I live with people who have disabilities. I was for many years, I was the federal disability coordinator for the Internal Revenue in our district, and have dealt with people all the way up to being on state committees dealing with disabilities. So I'm very familiar with the area of disability and how to deal with it. And it's a complex deal. But
how did they treat people coming in with off the DSM as this? Do they treat the DSM as the same as somebody who's deaf, for instance?
Well, the state, in particular, the state of Oregon, didn't deal so much with the mental disabilities that people would have. Of course, keep in mind that when I was dealing with it, the community, the medical community, even within the past 20 years, has
greatly
redefined.
Shifted. Yeah.
Yeah. You have people claiming they have conditions today that never existed when I was coming up in things.
Well, and then you have things that have been taken off, and changed status. It used to be that, like, homosexuality, for instance, was viewed as a mental disorder, and now it's not. So there's a lot of that's what I mean. That's what I was saying by the concept of a mental disorder is not a static concept. So the idea,
that's right.
Yeah, so the idea that anybody should have this, monolithic, defined, fundamental understanding of it as being the same as whether you have an able body, it's an unfair standard. It's not realistic, and quite frankly, I don't believe that we should be defining people who have displayed that they have mental illness as necessarily having that be something that can't be overcome. So, yeah.
Well, I'm always a little bit taken back, and I really don't like the fact when I meet people that they have given in to society's desire to label them in one form or another. So, like, when you have people that are, predisposed towards their homosexual tendencies, they define themselves in that fashion, and whenever you get into a conversation with them, at least that's been my experience, they start out with labeling themselves, I'm this or I'm that. And it extends way beyond that. For example, people who are in, who have issues with substance abuse, and they go to their AA meetings or whatever, they have to say, I am an alcoholic, or I am this, or I am... See, I have a problem with labeling people and our society's propensity to want to do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's the human condition. The human condition wants to label itself by anything other than a creature made in the image of God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and do you think that's because they are supposed to be identifying? They are supposed to be identifying with something, but when they reject God as the primary identifier, I don't know if you call that.
Yeah, that's a good observation.
Then they cling to something else, whether it's I'm an alcoholic or I'm a homosexual or I'm a ableist.
They have to cling to something lesser than that standard, but as they perceive it, bigger than themselves. And a lot of times it's about clinging to a particular community. So it could be...
Which is why you see the social justice movement.
Right, exactly.
Because that's bigger than themselves, but still pales in comparison, obviously. But
and it's, I can define myself as my role in a community, whether it's like father. I can define myself as a part of a community, whether it's, the LGBTQ community. I can define myself as a part of a nation, like I'm American. I can define myself by my skin color, like I was going to say I'm black, but I'm not black. But I'm also not. I'm also not LGBTQ, so that doesn't work.
You don't know what you are, Josh. You've been,
you're a mutt.
You've been accepted by the black community. You've been accepted by the Indian community.
I don't know that I've been accepted by the black community.
We would drive down the street with Josh and there would be like, when we were going through
I'm scared for what you're about to say, I'll be honest.
No, when we would go through the reservation, there'd be the Indian guys that'd be giving Josh a thumbs up, or we'd be driving down the street and a Hispanic, we'd be stopping at a stoplight, and there's a couple of Hispanics standing there, and they'd be giving Josh a thumbs up.
In any case,
remember Josh?
No, I don't. But I know you've told me this story before. We have this tendency to define ourselves by things other than what God wants us to define ourselves, and we pick all of these things, whether culture, race, our sexuality, all sorts of different things to define ourselves that way. And I think that's what this person's doing, and that's why they're so bothered, because this is a platform by which they could define themselves and have this be a larger thing, and they sort of viewed Joker as their champion.
Yeah, their champion. It's a good word.
Yeah, their champion of their cause.
And then when it's not recognized, in his 35 seconds,
right?
It's like, he had an opportunity for us, and he hurt our cause.
Yeah,
it's a little unfair. All right, moving on. This might be quicker. Kevin Spacey sympathizes and can relate to what it feels like to have your world suddenly stop.
Of course.
And he draws comparisons with his situation with the countless Americans who can't go to work. Do we have a problem with Kevin Spacey saying that?
I don't have a problem with him saying that. I think it's true.
I think that falls into the who cares category.
Yeah. Maybe he can appreciate, that, but...
Are people offended by him saying that?
Oh, yeah. Because of because of the way in which...
Because he created his...
Yeah, it was his own. Okay. It was his own doing versus you have now this thing imposed on you, which...
Look, just because it was his own doing doesn't mean that he shouldn't be able to understand the effects. I mean, that's what he's saying. The effect of not being able to go to work and the effect of having your world turned upside down. Okay,
He says, in this instance, I feel as though I can relate to what it feels like to have your world suddenly stop. And so while we may have found ourselves in similar situations, albeit for very different reasons and circumstances, sorry if I'm laughing. It's not funny, but I still believe that some of the emotional struggles are very much the same. And so I do have empathy for what it feels like to be told you suddenly can't go back to work.
I wonder the context of that. You know, like, what sort of interview was happening where he said that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know who he was speaking to. Oh, he was on a podcast. He was on it's called Bits and Pretzels podcast. I don't know what that podcast is, but it was just earlier in April.
I am certainly not offended by Kevin Spacey saying that he can relate and that he's a person. That doesn't bother me. And he even notes that it's for completely different reasons.
Yeah, but he did. He had a lot of Twitter backlash. Poor thing, suffering the consequences of his bad behavior, wrote someone. Another person says it's a two different thing. People aren't allowed to work because they want to keep the people safe, while you're not allowed to work anymore because they want to keep the people safe, which is nice one. And then I guess sexual predator is the same as corona. They're just a virus in this world.
Yeah.
Wow. He opened himself up for that one, didn't he?
I mean, I guess so. It's also on the back of, like, his poor taste or, tone deaf thing where he was like, did you see the video where he was like sitting in front of the fire in his Frank Underwood persona, speaking into an issue that is probably just better if he laid low type thing?
No, what is this?
I'd have to search for it, but this was a few months ago maybe, but he was like in front of a fire, and I can't remember what he was talking about, but it was like it was a situation where I was like, you have no business talking into this, and also why are you acting in your character, which is a character who has the behaviors of the things that you're being accused of currently and stuff. So it's like it's just in really poor taste and like
kind of a creeper,
Yeah, it kind of came across that way. Like maybe he doesn't care about the allegations against him, and he's just continuing this. Like I don't know. It was really weird, and he got a lot of backlash for it. So maybe that's people are coming through it with that last time they saw him type thing. It's like this guy is just. Doesn't get it, does he? And so he's saying this thing, and
it's really interesting though. Like if you're paying attention, like that thing that we watched what is it, Out of Shadows, or even the new Ryan Murphy show on
Hollywood
on Netflix. Like
no bueno.
If those things are to be believed, and I think they are to some degree, if those things are to be believed, like it's not. Personally, it's not hard for me to think that Kevin Spacey doesn't think that he is any different than other people, other than the fact that he's been exposed.
Like you're saying, like there's a reality in which Kevin Spacey's like, "What did I do wrong? Like this is what people do. Like this is what I've come to know. Do. When I came into this industry, this was status quo, and now why am I being blamed for it?
And this still is status quo. It's just." I've been found out. I've been turned into a scapegoat, but it's still happening.
Yeah, and it could be that the reason why some of the people are calling him out is because really what he's saying when he makes his statement is kind of like, "Whoa, welcome to my world."
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. For the record, we're not justifying or supporting like that lifestyle. For those of you that don't know, that Hollywood show, which I watched 3 episodes of it. Can't say I recommend it, but I did just to see what it was. It's all about like the dark side and the underside of Hollywood in the 50s, I think it is. The 50s and 60s. I think it's 50s. Josh?
Yeah, it's the golden age, yeah.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of immorality going on in that show. So yeah.
So this is a good point for you to point out to your listeners that they always need to keep you and Josh and people like they need to keep people like us in prayer, because we oftentimes have to subject ourselves to things for their benefit.
Do you remember a movie called Heritage? Do you remember that with Toni Collette? Was it Heritage?
No.
Family?
Gosh.
Heritage? Legacy?
I thought it started with a C.
I thought it was Heritage.
It's the one that the girl that does the clicking thing.
Yes, the clicking thing.
Heritage.
I swear it was called Heritage. Anyway.
Yes, I'll find the title. You keep going.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, like, sometimes Adam and I will watch things and be like, why are we watching this?
Yep.
Because we're trying to, like, keep our eyes on the pulse of it.
Hereditary.
I was close.
You were
Heritage,
close.
Hereditary.
You were close.
But, yeah, long and short of it.
Or we'll be like, we should probably go see that, huh? Yeah, we should probably go see that.
That's why we watched that terrible movie the other night for our first watch party where we watched that.
Oh, gosh,
The Roommate.
Movie.
It was terrible.
It was terrible.
But it was trending, number one.
Yeah,
Why it was trending? I don't know.
Yeah, I was watching that show with my wife, and we got to episode 3, and we were like, yeah, I mean, I've had enough. I get it. I'm done.
My point being just pray for us for protection because we have to subject ourselves to a lot of that nonsense.
Yeah, I would suggest you don't watch Hereditary if you have a sensitive soul.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
It doesn't exactly end. That's the one that doesn't end on the good note, right?
No,
like straight up, like
I will go ahead and spoil it for you.
Yeah.
That movie ends with you understanding that this woman, you've watched her life devolve, and in her entire life, she's been involved in it's a spoiler alert. Her entire life has been set up to involve her in a occult ritual in which she will usher in the Antichrist or something like that.
And the movie literally ends with
the Antichrist.
chanting this thing to bring forth. I can't remember, maybe, but to bring forth the Antichrist. And there's all these people around, and there's all this
like people throughout her life.
There's all this imagery, and it's disturbing. And then credits.
Yeah,
and you're like, what?
But it's one of those genre defining,
Well, that filmmaker, they did the Midsummer,
which also, by the way, I would not recommend. That's essentially how Midsummer ends.
What I'll say is that filmmaker has a very specific style, and I think that he's gonna be prolific in the genre because of what he's doing, like in terms of his style. I think.
Yeah.
It's really visceral. Like his use of sounds and imagery is really intense. But
yeah, Midsummer.
I don't know the name of the filmmaker.
Midsummer ends very similarly. Let's just put it that way.
That one actually disturbed me more because of how less overt it was.
It maybe goes further. Well, it's interesting. That movie's particularly interesting because it takes place in like a summer land sort of setting where it's always always sunny, it's always bright, it's never dark.
Whereas normally in a horror movie, after nighttime, like when the sun is shining, your heart can calm down. Your heart goes back to a normal rhythm because nothing's bad's going to happen because it's daytime. Right. But in this Midsummer movie, all the bad stuff happens during the daytime, and so you're always like uneasy.
Right. Well, there's never really a nighttime.
Right.
A nighttime in the location.
Right. It's part of the whole thing in the movie. Ari Aster is the name of that filmmaker, but
yeah.
Anyways, okay, on to perhaps a better discussion. Sorry, Kevin Spacey and whatever your name is. Whatever your name is that didn't like Joaquin Phoenix.
If you're interested in watching Kevin Spacey's odd shorts or whatever, Jesse's posting them in the comment feed. So.
Oh, did he post the fireplace one? It is a fireplace one, right?
There's a fireplace and there's a kitchen, apparently.
Okay, I didn't see the kitchen one. Also, I would just say this, like, as far as those movies go, Hereditary, The Witch might be another one, Midsummer, perhaps even, like, The Lighthouse, which I've read all about. No, but I'm planning on to.
It's on Prime Video.
I couldn't log into Amazon the other day. That's what I was going to watch when I posted that. But I've read all about it. I was going to say, if you're like sensitive or less mature or whatever you want to say, which is fine, I would just suggest doing that with like a partner, so that you can like debrief and talk through it, whether that's during the movie or after the movie, because sometimes it's not always awesome to be exposing yourself to that alone.
Well, I would suggest not doing it at all, personally.
Yeah, what was I say? If you're going to watch it,
I think you have to. I think you have to ask yourself why you're watching those things. If it's for pure entertainment,
yeah,
it like just think about what you're saying. Like you want to watch people get killed. You want to watch people get
you're
murdered.
like the people who go to the Coliseum and watch horrible things.
Yeah.
People get ripped apart.
Terrible things happen to terrible people. That's what you want to watch. There's something that's kind of messed up about that, and you have to ask yourself, what part of you is wanting to watch that? Is it your sinful nature that's craving terrible things happening to terrible people? And if so, then you should distance yourself from that. That being said, if you are, maybe a little more philosophical, and you're looking for the image of God to prevail in those things, I think that that's possible too. There are things to learn, and some of my favorite movies are horror movies where you can see because the contrast is so heavy, you can see the difference between the good and the evil, which is why I really like the horror genre. Has certain elements in it, specifically the ones that really stand out are the ones where you have protagonists, And oftentimes the horror genre, especially since the 1980s, has flipped so that the protagonist is the antagonist. So you have Nightmare on Elm Street, where it's Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees or Mike Myers or whatever. Or sorry,
Michael Myers.
Michael Myers. My bad. But the really interesting ones, the ones that I think really gain a cult, not a cult, but a cult following, are like the Evil Dead series, for instance, where you have a standout main character who's fighting the evil and they're the good guy, So you have Ash, you have Sidney Prescott from the Scream series. I guess you do have, off and on, you have Michael Myers' sister, or you have like Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street. In any case, where you see good and evil playing against each other, then it goes more into the realm of like the Grimm fairy tales. Like you go back and you check out the fairy tales, those old fairy tales.
That's one I missed, by the way. I didn't ever see that Hansel and Gretel movie.
Oh yeah, I wanted to see that Gretel and Hansel.
Well, yeah,
we should watch that.
So
you're talking specifically, Josh, about fairy tales that have not been Disneyized, I would say.
Right, that haven't had the Disney treatment. Or go back and look at the ones that have, and look at their origins, and you'll find that most of them are morality plays that are actually really dark in nature.
Yes.
They're meant to teach people to stay away from bad things.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and I would agree with you 100% that those individuals, if you're a disciple of Christ, you have. By and large, you have no business watching those really dark type of media experiences because you're delving into an area where scripturally you're not supposed to. You're supposed to keep your mind pure and focused upon where God would have you to be, not the weird darkness that exists in the world.
Yeah. Well, go back to Philippians chapter 4, and it talks about, the peace of God that surpasses all understanding is predicated upon praying with God at all times, thanking Him for the good things, and then focusing your mind on the things that are good, right? The things that are pure, the things that are lovely. Well, if you're a person who spends your whole day understanding the dark things, then maybe watching good overcome evil is something that's really helpful, So like, say if you're a cop or something like that, and it's like you're constantly around dark things, then seeing the outworking of those things, where good is overcoming evil, could be really helpful for you. But if you're not a person who is that, why would you inundate yourself with that except for educational purposes?
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for educational purposes, for like a show like this, that we stay up to date on the pulse of what society is consuming.
Yeah, we were talking about it Was it last episode? Just the author of the article talking about binge watching things on Netflix. Do it with your mind on. Do it with your mind off. Experiment with yourself. See how it makes you feel. Blah 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 blah. Like no.
Yeah,
Don't watch Hollywood, which, like I said, is filled with all the immorality under the sun to describe how it was back then. Don't just do that for no reason.
Not only that, not only do we get into what we just discussed with the purity that the believer is supposed to have with. Quite frankly, when you watch how they do things on Hollywood, and you know what the truth of reality is, you can't believe what you see in these movies because they always distort it one way or another. I love the fact, an example would be, and I know I'm dating myself, but the old series Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Every time they had some type of a nuclear emergency, according to the movie, they would always so they had a nuclear reactor on this submarine, and in order to prevent disaster, they would always pull the rods out in order to prevent the nuclear disaster. Mm-hmm. Well, the reality is, if you're going to prevent nuclear fission in a nuclear reactor, you push the rods in to disrupt the action. And I could just give you example of things that the media presents in movies and commercials and what have you, which are the exact opposite of reality.
And it is kind of, you are dating yourself, and it is kind of a weird reference, but I'll tell you why.
All right, if you want a more current example of what he just said, watch the Chernobyl miniseries on HBO because they talk about the same thing with the rods.
I'll tell you why
stabilizing.
I'll tell you why it's a particular example for Pastor Monty is because he's actually certified to disarm a nuclear reaction on a submarine.
Yes, I'm a qualified nuclear submariner. That's correct.
I'm not joking.
And that's
actually true.
That's when people go, wait,
that
what?
is one of my qualifications, yes.
That's when people go, wait, what?
Yes.
You mean that guy who's talking in the Southern twang and talking about Steven Seagal and talking about this and that, and that man is qualified to do that?
What was the submarine? What was the name of the submarine you served on?
I served on the Aspro, the USS Aspro.
Aspro.
Aspro?
A nuclear fast attack submarine.
It was called Aspro?
Yeah, ASPRO, yes.
Oh,
PRO.
Aspro. Okay, I thought you were saying Aspro.
What is Aspro? What is that?
ASPRO. It's already been decommissioned.
What is that, though? What is Aspro?
When you're on a nuclear submarine, part of what you have to do is go through a process where you have to qualify in order to get your dolphins.
Pastor Monty, Aspro is almost as good as Aspro.
What in the world?
I didn't name the ship. I was just fine.
All right.
Pastor Monty used to disarm nukes on a ship called the Aspro.
Okay, let's not go that far.
All right. So, on to the next thing. We got about 20 minutes, not quite.
Okay.
So, we seem to be easing our way into or out of into life as we knew it versus, like out of COVID-19, depending on how you look at it. There's all sorts of talk right now about May 15th this and a phase 1.
In Oregon.
Yeah, and a phase 1 of reopening things and so on and so forth in terms of getting back to life as we knew it since before COVID-19.
Right.
But the discussion I want to have is just in terms of how we will remember this time in like the arts and culture. So I think just earlier this week, Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande posted a
giants of philosophical thought.
We have 20 minutes. New song or music video, and talking about love during COVID-19 times and so on and so forth.
Okay.
There's this artist who has a gallery called Gallery on Pause. And she's just receiving submissions for people to be, creative and put their art out there to express themselves during like a, very specific time in
right.
in history and stuff. And just in terms of like understanding the zeitgeist of our time during the corona and stuff, like, do you guys think that there'll be like long, like how do you think, man, what is my question even? What will be the lasting impact in terms of the culture once we go back to normal? Do you think that there will be like a major shift in things? I guess maybe an example is a good way to get across what I'm trying to say. Post the recession, for example, brought forth like Shark Tank and like creativity and like entrepreneurship and stuff. I think Shark Tank, like the recession was in 2008, obviously, and Shark Tank debuted in like 2009 or not even a year after.
Yeah, it's on
after
season
the recession
11
and stuff.
right now.
Yeah, it's actually been a long time. So that's an example. Post 9/11, for example, there was a massive shift in like patriotism and things of that nature, and how we understood our roles and the way we interact as Americans and stuff like that. How do you think that the coronavirus time in our history will shift things as we seem to be getting back to
here's where we get
a
to
return?
Here's where we get to predict flying cars.
Hoverboards.
I think that we're going to have a unique marriage between social distancing and talk to the hand.
And what? Talk to the hand?
Like, do you think that there will be a collection of art, whether it be like live art or art like paintings and stuff like that, to where people will look back on this time in history and be like, I see, they were going through this thing at this time and it shaped the way they thought about things and it drastically altered this thing or that thing or so on?
Yeah, I think, especially with where art is concerned, I can tell you from my particular place as an artist, since we started this, since we couldn't have church services with everybody, so that it's been almost 2 months, I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe over 2 months now.
Yeah.
It's been about a month and a half so far.
I've released a new song every single week. And when I say released, I don't mean like I had it like sitting in my vault of songs. I mean, I wrote a new song every week and played it for the church. My playlist, like, you can go to my music, my YouTube for my musician account or whatever. You can go there.
Bandcamp.
Well, not on Bandcamp. I haven't released it on
on
Bandcamp
there?
because I'm waiting. I'm waiting to release it on Bandcamp. But I've bootlegged our Sunday services, and I have a playlist of all my original music, going back to the beginning on YouTube. Like, if you look me up as an artist, you can see I have like videos, going all the way back to the beginning, and there's new music. And I assume that that's going to be the case for everybody. I assume, like, the thing on my mind in regard to that is, what do I name an album coming out of this time? Because I'll bet you everybody will be creating albums or
I had an article that's on the thread on our chat also. Speaking of album names and stuff, there's a whole thing right now in terms of women, specifically women musicians, post Me Too and expressing themselves and emoting in that way. And I think Fiona Apple just released an album.
Yes.
The album is either called this or the song is called this.
It's on my list. I want to listen to it.
Something about Fetch the Bolt Cutters or something like that.
I love Fiona Apple.
In reference to, being whatever, shackled by whatever sort of trauma maybe she had before.
Right.
But yeah, sort of to your point, I guess. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I imagine that will be the case. I know that so our church has a large sort of undercurrent of music. There's a large music culture, and I know that there's people like one of our like sister bands in the church, Inchoate, is working on music right now. So I have my own music project. I've got my music project with producer Jasmine called The Theory Of, and we're working on music heavily. Like, I know that people are being creative, even if they're separated from each other, they're being creative. And that's just within our group. What I assume will happen is that there will be an explosion of collaboration. So I think that there's an explosion of innovation in collaboration right now, where people are doing like Zoom calls to put their music together and to do their art together and all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah, like
so digital collaboration, right?
So like the Justin Bieber Ariana Grande one, that's a big one right now. I think Beyonce just did one with like a rapper. So you see it already happening with like the big mainstream names and stuff too.
Right, and they've been doing it like in putting digital concerts together and things like that.
Yep.
So I think you'll see a big explosion on the digital side that's already happening, and so that's going to innovate new ways to do that. And I think in the future you're going to see a lot of digital innovation where people are going to be more freed to live their personal lives, but still work together. I think it's really gonna challenge the way that studios have tried to have really created a nexus of operations. I really think that the nexus of operations will kind of go away.
What do you mean, the nexus of operations?
And I think that what you're going to find too is that the media moguls as such are going to be watching for those type of venues where you have people expressing themselves online. Do you guys watch The Mask?
The Masked Singer, you mean?
The Masked Singer, yeah. Do you watch that?
I watched the first season of it.
I think it's horrible, but I'm aware of it, and I've seen several episodes.
I think it's
interesting.
genius. I think it's genius. It's like mystery mixed with American Idol.
Well, what they've devolved
Gaudy,
into at this point is that whenever they eliminate a character, now instead of just having the elimination of a character, they have an after deal where they bring that character forward and they have people respond to them and they ask them questions and all that. Well, and one of the guests that they have then who sings a song at the end of their after party or whatever it is, which is all online, by the way, or pretty much online. They have this guy that they discovered that he sings a song, but he's actually a surgeon. So he's a doctor. He's a medical doctor. He's a surgeon, and yet he's got a fantastic voice.
You're not talking about.
And they discovered him online, and so he contributes to this after party type thing going on. So my point is that you're going to see a lot of talent that is brought forward because you have business executives that are also poring over some of the stuff that's coming out and watching for talent.
Yeah, so but that show also has as a judge from The Hangover.
Ken Jeong.
Who's also a medical doctor.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, but what I said earlier, you wanted me to define nexus of
operations.
Nexus of operations. So a nexus is a central point, and so what I'm saying is the concept of a nexus of operations, I think, is really being defined to fit more with technology, and I think that will be true in the arts, and I think that it's true in the church. I think that the church in general has really had to stretch itself, and our church in particular has become a lot more busy than it was. So I think what you're going to find, not that it ever wasn't, but what you're going to find is a lot of restructuring of the concept of what the nexus is. Is the nexus of operations a technological infrastructure or communication itself that essentially we can communicate in spirit and in truth rather than in the physical? I think that's a real possibility, and I think that will extend itself out to the arts, and is extending itself out to the arts, and I think that you're going to see a lot of craving for more programming done from people's houses, and I think we're gonna be moving away from the super high production,
like big production companies
of things. I was just reading an article the other day about the downfall of single cam docu-style series. Like The Office, or to a lesser degree Parks and Rec, or Modern Family. Like it was basically saying that style of camera work was basically trying to steal or ride on the zeitgeist of shows like Survivor, which came off of the crisis of the writer's strike that like basically caused television networks to go for low funded live television where they didn't have to pay stars and so on and so forth, and it cost them like nothing to make, right? And so then then networks started to produce shows that were, that way, that emulated that style, but then that's kind of gone the wayside now, and they're waiting for the next big thing. And it wouldn't surprise me if you had, a show, for instance, that featured what you're talking about, Pastor Monty, where it was a show, think Star Search, but that was done with like YouTubers, where you call into people's homes and they like become famous, through Zoom calls.
Yeah.
Like that wouldn't surprise me at all. So
I wonder if there's going to be like a section in one of the Smithsonian's or something. Like, here's what the coronavirus produced in American history in terms of the art and the this and the that.
If you ever get a chance to check out the Smithsonian and its museum on anything, honestly, it's real crazy.
Yeah, and don't do it, and don't give yourself a day to do that either.
Right, we did that. There's a Batmobile there, guys. There's a Batmobile.
They currently have what, 8 museums or something like that?
Yeah,
you need like a solid week just to do the museums in DC. Yeah.
When we were there, we could only take in 3 of them.
Yeah. When we were there, we took in as much as we could with 4 hours.
So apparently John says it gives people a glimpse into celebrity life, exclusive access. We get to see inside their homes like MTV Cribs, but also then adding a talent element. Actually,
one of the articles that I had, which I had found out, was a dated article, several years old, 3 or 4 years old, had to do with super fandom and social media and stuff. And I shelved the article because it's like, oh, it's not necessarily anything new. But I do think, like John is saying, like, because of where we're at now and being stuck at home, and then the even more increased use of social media through these artists and stuff, you're getting a more of a direct experience and like what that means and what that looks like and how that affects people and produces bad things as much as good things. But yeah,
I think that's a good way of putting it. I think you're going to have a lot more direct experiences, a lot more raw sort of guerrilla experiences, rather than high production, because people have understood through this, maybe they want those things, but they don't necessarily need those things.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for a good artistic explosion. My only caution is just that art informs and it inspires, right? But art basically emulates too. Now this process has sort of solidified. Yeah, Heidi says less makeup and stylists spruced up stars. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. This process and technology has sort of gelled that all to be one big ball. Where it used to take time for art to emulate life and then inform future life and so on and so forth. Now it kind of happens immediately.
Yeah.
But what are you informing and what are you emulating? This is the other thing that I just want to say. Like, there's a reason why I don't watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians. No offense. I think you're going to have you're going to have an explosion of worse art.
Yeah.
Art that's just bad. But put into the mainstream.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had that, people have... YouTube is essentially the public access. To bring them out into the networked mainstream concept. And I think there's a lot of people who viewed YouTubing, like, did you know that YouTubing or being a YouTuber is like the number one thing that young people want to become these days.
Yes, I did.
Heard
him talk about it.
Crazy. And I think that you're going to have a lot of people who think that is more attainable now. You know, it's going to be much more attainable now than it was before. But what are you emulating, and what are you putting out there? I think we're going to have a lot of bad content because, quite frankly, you know, without the polish, culture is pretty ugly.
Without the makeup.
Yeah, without the makeup and the beer goggles.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that led us perfectly at 10 o'clock, so I think we're going to end there. It's a good place to end. So, thank you. Thanks, Pastor, for tuning in. Thanks for y'all that are on our stream right now, and we'll listen in the future, and we'll see you guys in a week, I guess. Adios.
The views presented in this program are not meant to express the specific views of the Aletheia Bible Fellowship.